And now I see live on Facebook. So welcome back everyone once again to Earth Day Berks 2021. Very excited today to welcome Judy Wicks to this session. I'll tell you a little bit about Judy and her organization we're going to find out about today. Judy is the founder of Altogether Now PA, which is a nonprofit with a mission to unite urban and rural communities in building resilient, self-reliant regional economies. Judy also runs the Circle of Aunts and Uncles, a microloan fund for local entrepreneurs without access to family and friends stage capital, which she founded in 2015. Judy is the founder of the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia in 2021 and co-founder that year of the Nationwide Business Alliance for White Dog Cafe, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, and a pioneer in the farm to table movement, which is awesome. And she ran that restaurant till 2010. She's also the author of Good Morning Beautiful Business, and that was published in 2013, and it won a national gold medal for business leadership and has been translated into Chinese and Korean. Her numerous local and national awards include the Impact Award for Economic Justice from Social Venture Network, Women Chefs and Restaurateurs Lifetime Achievement Award, and the James Beard Foundation Humanitarian of the Year Award. So we are honored to have you here today, Judy. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk to us today.
Well, it's great to be here, Courtney. Thanks for inviting me. And happy Earth Day weekend, everybody out there in Berks County and beyond. It's exciting to be with you today and to tell you about my latest work with Altogether Now Pennsylvania. And this is such a great kind of auspicious time as we end the COVID quarantine and come back into our normal, so to speak, normal life, but hopefully not back to business as usual, but with a new perspective. And a time to, ask how can I do a better job of taking care of Mother Earth, and to me, a big part of that is around localization, where we really ask ourselves, well, where does my food come from? Where does my energy come from? Where do my clothes come from? Where do my building supplies, if I'm going to build a house or renovate, come from? And how can these supply chains be sustainable and work in harmony with nature and be just? And now's the time to do it as we re-enter. So I'm thrilled to be talking to you at this particular time. So I think one of the things that the pandemic has shown us is how vulnerable we are. And there was a time when the grocery stores were empty of food. And meanwhile, the centralized, industrialized, corporate controlled food system was failing us. They were pouring milk down the drain and killing all the pigs and so on because the system broke down. And it was our local farmers that rose to the occasion and strengthened the local system. So we saw from that a preview, in a sense, of what's to come with climate change as more and more supply chains break down due to weather and more pandemics, social upheaval, and so on. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own journey. As Courtney mentioned, I'm the founder of the White Dog Cafe, which I ran for 26 years. I retired from that, sold the business, and now work full-time on my passion, which is building local economies. So I'm going to start with some lessons I learned at the White Dog Cafe, and then build it from there. So this program is on restorative local economies are the future. So the lessons I learned at the White Dog Cafe, there were three, and reimagining growth, protecting what we love, and moving from me to we. And by the way, for those who don't know, the White Dog Cafe is in Philadelphia. It's in West Philadelphia, 3407 Locust Street. I lived above the shop in the old fashioned way of running a business. So I actually lived in the house for almost 40 years. And after I sold the White Dog 11 years ago, I I moved from the house. I didn't want to live above someone else's restaurant, but it was wonderful living above my own. So reimagining growth. One of the mantras we hear in the business world is grow or die. You have to keep building your business larger and larger, or you're going to go out of business. And so, at one point I thought, well, am I just a big sissy because, I don't have more than one unit, as they say. But I realized that what made me happy about my work were the authentic relationships, that I had with my employees, with my customers, with my neighbors, with my natural environment, with my suppliers, and that if I grew larger and larger, I would lose that connection. So, and I also saw how chain stores are like invasive species. They go into other people's communities and smother out the indigenous businesses as they spread their businesses across the country. So I thought to myself, well, growth is important. You need to grow in some ways. Maybe you don't have to grow in material ways, but growth is important. And so I thought, well, how does nature grow? Well, nature grows deeper in place. Nature grows to become more resilient, more diverse, more resilient, more in service to the local ecosystem. So that's how we can also grow our businesses and our economy, to grow deeper in place, to be of deeper service to our local community. So one of my favorite examples of this, by the way, at the White Dog, instead of starting another white dog chain of white dogs, I started the Black Cat, which was my store next door that's sold fair trade and local crafts. But my favorite big example of this is Singerman's family of businesses in Ann Arbor, Michigan. They had a very successful and continue to have a very successful deli, which they could have made into a chain. But instead, they looked to see what their community needed. And they started a bakery. They started a creamery to make their own ice cream and dairy products. They started a coffee roasting business, and 8 other businesses with annual sales of $65 million. And in doing this, they reduced imports, into the community. So when you buy your products from companies that don't reside in your own community, that capital is leaving your community and going to these large corporate coffers, far away, instead of enriching your own community. So it reduces the imports, increases local self-reliance, so you have more what you need in your own community, and it spreads ownership more broadly, because what Zingerman's did is each time they started a new business, they gave their employees the opportunities to be an owner in the new business. So another lesson was protecting what you love. I had heard about climate change back in 2000, but I didn't make a move about it. We actually had programs on it in the White Dog, and I'd heard about renewable energy, but I hadn't been motivated to buy it. And then there was a drought. This was, I guess, around 1999 in Pennsylvania. And I love to hike up in the Poconos. In fact, that's where I am right now. I have a cabin in the Poconos. I speak to you from my cabin in the woods right now. And so I love to come up here and go hiking. And during the drought, I saw the stress that the woods was under, that the leaves were starting to fall off the top of the trees, even though it was only August. And the ferns on Fern Hill, instead of being lush green and waving in the breeze, they were all crinkled up like brown tissue paper on the floor of the forest. And getting to the stream, which was usually rushing blue water, there was just dust on the rocks. So there was just this eerie silence in the woods. Not even the birds were singing. The fear of fire was in the air. And I thought, oh my gosh, I get it. That parts of the world are going to have droughts and fires. Other parts of the world are going to have storms and floods. And of course, over the last 20 years, really, that's exactly what's happened. And so I became a tree hugger. I just went over and hugged this big oak tree and pressed my face against the bark and promised I would go back to Philadelphia and figure out how to buy renewable energy. And the White Dog became the first business in Pennsylvania to buy 100% of our electricity from renewable sources. At the time, it was wind power.
Wonderful. That's
So
awesome.
the third lesson was moving from me to we. So one of the things we prided ourselves on at the White Dog was buying from local farmers. And this was a farm couple that we bought from Branch Creek Farm, Mark and Judy Dornstrike. And Mark used to say to me that good farming was the balance of feminine energy and masculine energy. And he considered masculine energy to be efficiency and feminine to be nurturing. So if you have too much masculine energy and not enough feminine, you might have a well-run farm, very efficient, but you're not going to have the best tomatoes. On the other hand, if you have too much feminine energy, too much nurturing and not enough masculine energy, you might have luscious tomatoes and happy chickens, but you're going to go out of business because you don't have enough efficiency. You're wasting your time. You're not going to be able to stay in business. And so I realized that our whole industrial food system was out of balance. That there was take the battery cages for producing eggs. It's all about masculine energy. It's all about efficiency. How little space and light and air and food and water can you give the laying hen in order to get the cheapest egg possible? No nurturing, no feminine energy whatsoever. It's just disgraceful. So when I found out about this at the White Dog, I found out sources for pastured chickens, where the chickens are actually out on the pasture, not in cages or not even indoors, but out on pasture, pecking at the ground for bugs and worms and whatnot. And so we got all of our meat and eggs in this way. Then I heard about the horrible way that the pigs are treated in the industrial system, that the mother pigs are kept in these cages where they can't even take a step forward or backward or turn around their entire lives. They're artificially inseminated. The babies are taken away prematurely. They're artificially inseminated again as though they were pieces of machinery in a factory. So when I heard this, I was appalled because pigs are mammals, like our dogs, like us, and mammals all share the capacity of the basic emotions, of joy, of grief, of loving your of other animals, of wanting to socialize and so on. So I realized that the pork I was buying at the White Dog must come from the system, because if you don't know otherwise, that's where pork comes from this kind of industrial system. So cruel, and such a breach of our fiduciary and stewardship duties to care for farm animals. So I just came into the White Dog and said, we have to take all the pork off the menu. We cannot be part of this cruel system. We needed to find a source for pastured pork. So we did. This is a farm out in Lancaster County. This is how pigs are supposed to live. This is how they like it. They like to lie in pig piles and be in the sun and move around and so on. Then we found out about the plight of the cow. This is a feed lot out west where cows live up to their knees in manure, just horrible conditions. So we switched to all pastured meat. This is Bill Elkins from Buck Run Farm in Bucks County with his herd of Black Angus, all grass fed. Also with dairy, very, very cruel industry. One of the very worst because babies are taken away from their mothers at birth so that human beings can drink the baby's milk. The baby never gets to drink its mother's milk. It's just the most cruel, heartbreaking situation. So this is a picture of Hawthorne Valley out in the Hudson Valley, Hawthorne Valley Farm, where the babies are left with their mothers for the first, 8 or 9 months. So anyway, I finally got to the point where at the White Dog, I said, well, we've achieved our goal. All of our animal products come from small family farms where the animals are treated with kindness. This is Dougie Newbald with one of her Nubian goats. And she used to say that when she kissed her goat's ears, it made the cheese better. Understand that. Look at that lovely ear.
Beautiful.
So anyway, I was thinking, well, this is our market niche. This is our competitive advantage. We're the only restaurant in Philadelphia that gets all of our meat products from, humane sources and so on, as well as organic fruits and vegetables from local farmers. This is all about us. This is all, about our little network of farmers that are supplying us. And then I had a transformational moment that changed my life and continues to change my life because I realized that there is no such thing as one sustainable business, no matter how good your practices are, whether you use renewable energy and you compost and you buy from farmers and all these things, you can only be part of a sustainable system. So, it wasn't enough for me to have all these great practices within my business. I had to turn my attention to the whole food system. It wasn't just about the network of farmers that were supplying the white dog. It was about the idea of building a network of farmers that supply our region. And having one restaurant do this is a drop in the bucket. So I started a nonprofit called Fair Food, and Fair Food mission was to connect local farmers with the urban marketplace. So we had farm and chef meetups. Fair Food was run by Ann Carlin the whole 20 years. It lasted 20 years. We kind of did our job and finally closed Fair Food. We started a Fair Food farm stand at the Reading Terminal that was strictly all local food. And we had a guide for consumers of where to find local food. So that's, and she began this and did by taking the list of farms that the white dog bought from and went around to the other chefs in town. We didn't want to have the white dog go around to the other restaurants. That would seem kind of weird. So we started this nonprofit, which we funded in the beginning through white dog profits, and made this list of sources that she took around to the other restaurants. And so we kind of jump-started the local food movement in Philadelphia by helping chefs learn how to buy from local farmers. Then I asked the farmer who was bringing in 2 pigs a week. We bought 2 whole pigs a week from local farms. We used all the meat in different ways, the sausage or, of course, the bacon and the pork chops are the first to go. And we make pork sandwiches for the bar and so on. So this is actually a picture of me with Farmer Glenn at our Dance of the Ripe Tomatoes, which is our harvest festival. And so I asked Glenn, do you want to grow your business from the 2 pigs that you delivered to me a week? And he said he did. And I said, well, what's holding you back? And he said he needed $30,000 to buy a refrigerated truck so that he could deliver to other restaurants. So I loaned him the $30,000 and he bought a truck so that he could come in to pick up the meat from various farmers in the area, mostly Amish who don't drive, and then bring it into town to deliver to all the different restaurants. Whoops, went the wrong way there. So in this way, I moved from me to we. I moved from individualism, just wanted to have my restaurant be the best, to community, to realizing that we had to change the system and build community, a whole community that benefited from this. I needed to move from competition to cooperation, to realize that we needed to cooperate in order to build the food system. Now, within the system, just as nature is basically a cooperative system, but within nature and within our local economy, we do compete. We compete among the chefs to see who can make the best dishes with all that food from local farms. So, but it's a friendly competition. We're not trying to put each other out of business. It's a positive competition because it gives the consumers a variety of places to buy from. So it's a positive type of competition, but it's not a cutthroat. And that's what we need to move from in our society. Our capitalistic society in the United States is really grooms us to be individualistic and grooms us to be competitive without seeing that we, in order to survive, basically, we need to be cooperative and we need to build a community. We need to move from hoarding to sharing. I was hoarding my information, my knowledge, and my profits to that extent. And so in starting Fair Food, I actually shared my profits in a way that helped my competitors, by providing free consulting to my competitors to learn how to buy from farmers. And this all made me just feel so good. Once I started sharing in this way, it really changed my life. And I moved from fear to love because, we always have this fear of not having enough for ourselves. And so, we have to move from that place of fear to our love of community and of good food and so on. So I often have thought, why was I able to make that decision of moving from me to we, from individualism to community and from cooperation, from competitiveness to cooperation and so on. And I think that part of it was living in an Eskimo village, living in an indigenous culture. I was a VISTA volunteer in 1969 when I graduated from college, and I lived for a year in an Eskimo village. And there I witnessed a culture that was based on cooperation. There was no sense of competition. It was based on sharing. That, oh, here I am in 1969 wearing my Eskimo kaspak, it's called, an Eskimo dress, and my mucklucks made of seal fur. So the Eskimos were, they had no sense of envy. If you admire something an Eskimo has, they give it to you. There is no such thing as hoarding. There is no such thing as competition. They don't even know what that means. And so one of the ways that this is exemplified is in something called a seal party. When a man catches his first seal after a long, hard winter, his wife has a seal party and invites all the women in the village that come to their house. And the seal meat is divided between all the families. And then anything else that the family has in excess is also given away to other members of the village, whether it's some fabric or some canned goods or some candy. And at the end of the seal party, the tradition is to throw candy up into the air, and that's what's happening here. The women are catching the candy and the bubble gum and whatnot, and that's symbolic of the sharing, of what you have with others. And this whole idea of reciprocity, that giving and receiving is an equal balance, that you never, ever, ever take more than you give. And of course, in our culture, that's not the case. We're taught to take as much as you can. The bigger your house, the more clothes you have, the more stuff you have, the more successful you are. And we don't focus on giving back in the way that Indigenous people do. The whole concept of reciprocity is at the very heart of Indigenous life, whether you're an Eskimo or from an African tribe or, from the Amazon or wherever. Indigenous people who live close with the earth understand that life is based on the reciprocal flow of giving and receiving. It's like breathing in and breathing out. And we're out of kilter here in our society, and it's killing us. So the Eskimos were the happiest people I've ever met. They're always laughing all the time. They're always telling jokes. And I realized that their happiness was not based on money and material goods. Like we believe to be happy, you have to have money and a big house and lots of stuff. The Eskimos' happiness was based on community, on belonging. That's why they were happy. It was a big lesson to me. So, and I've found that throughout my life, it's from Indigenous people that I have learned the most basic, fundamental truths. Another Indigenous lesson for me came from the Zapatista Indians in Chiapas, Mexico. Indigenous people from a number of different tribes that came together and had a revolution on the day that NAFTA went into effect on January 1st, 1994. So they had an uprising because they were opposed to NAFTA, because they realized that it was going to put out of business Indigenous farmers, because it allowed the US to dump subsidized GMO corn into Mexico, subsidized with our tax dollars, that would put the peasants out of business in the domestic corn market and force them into factories, which was the big plan of the corporations and the government allies. The Zapatistas wanted to maintain their way of life. They wanted to do weaving and wear the Indigenous costumes and clothing that they have done for many generations, and not be forced into the maquiladoras to make cheap clothes for export to the United States and Germany. They wanted to keep their own languages and their culture, teach their children in their own tongue and with their own values. So I learned something from the Zapatistas that I hadn't thought about before, and that is the idea of self-reliance, local self-reliance. They wanted to grow their corn and other vegetables for their families' meals, and then to sell it in the domestic marketplace, where they go into market day and sell their farm products. They did not want to be dragged into the corporate controlled global economy. And so though I went to Chiapas to help the indigenous people, I ended up going down there for 10 years. I went every year for 10 years, working on economic development projects. And so I began to see how the plight of the Indians in Chiapas was the same of our farmers back in Pennsylvania, that they were being forced out by large corporate industrial farming. And around the world, that we were losing our self-reliance, that we were dependent on long distance corporate supply chains to deliver us our food. So I began to see another way, that we could have a global economy, a sustainable global economy that was a network of sustainable local economies that produced our basic needs locally. Then we still have trade globally and other things that we trade what we have in excess of, or things that we have that are special to our region. If we have a special cheese or wine or fashion or a special innovation that an entrepreneur has invented, we want to trade those things outside of our community, even globally, for what is unique and that we don't have locally, whether it's coffee or bananas or an art form from another culture. But we produce our basic needs close to home. So with this vision, I started a couple organizations, the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia. Again, I started that out of the White Dog and provided the resources to get it off the ground. It's now 20 years old. SBN just celebrated its 20th birthday. And around the same time, I co-founded BALI, the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies, which is a national, actually international because it involves Canada, organization. It's no longer called BALI, it's now called Common Futures. But so that took up a lot of my life for a number of years, getting these organizations off the ground. And then as I mentioned, I sold the White Dog and wrote a book, Good Morning Beautiful Business, in 2013 to really document all that I had learned, during my years at the White Dog. So the next time I was inspired by indigenous people was in 2016. I went to Standing Rock, and I organized a Thanksgiving dinner. We were going to feed 200. We ended up feeding 2,000 water protectors at Standing Rock, because I joined forces with some other groups. But I bought this photograph that was taken at Standing Rock. I actually have a large copy in my office at home of this indigenous person on horseback facing off against the militarized fossil fuel. Basically, they were fighting the fossil fuel industry, and there's the militarized local police and army and so on that were attacking the protesters. And so I was just so admiring of their bravery, and I could talk all day just about what I learned at Standing Rock. But I'm going to just tell you one story, and that's the story of the black snake. That there's a Lakota prophecy that's 1,000 years old, that said that one day a black snake would rise up out of the ground and move across the land, causing great sorrow and hardship. And that the indigenous people, the Lakotas, had now said that that the black snake was here, that they knew what the black snake was, that it was the pipelines and the fossil fuel industry. And the prophecy goes on to say 1,000 years ago, that if the people of the world did not unite to defeat the black snake, that the world will end. So that's where we are right now, that if the people of the world do not unite, if we don't all come together to defeat the fossil fuel industry, the world will end. So when we left Standing Rock, the elder said, go back to your community, find the black snake and slay the black snake in your own community. So when I got back to Pennsylvania, I realized that the black snake here is fracking. So I went on a tour up to Dimmock to see what it was like for the communities where fracked gas was being extracted. And as many people have heard, it's polluted the water. Here's the water from this man's house in Dimmock, PA, that his well became polluted. And I went around and saw all the horrible things that have happened to people in the area where the water is being extracted. And then I saw closer to Philadelphia, the suburban counties that are victims of the pipelines coming through right next to a house. This is highly flammable natural gas in both liquid form and vaporous form that is going through these communities, right by houses, right next to elementary schools, through seniors, next to senior centers and so on. Can you imagine living next door to this and not knowing if it's ever going to blow up? They show like the zone, the fire zone around here. If there ever were a leak that caught on fire, how many miles would be ablaze, and it's a pretty wide swatch. So I ended up, well, first of all, I decided that I did not want to use natural gas, that if I bought natural gas, if I gave the gas company my money, that I was complicit in this. So I put solar on my roof. I decided I would become an all electric house. And that's what we all have to do at some point. If we're going to beat climate change, that we have to stop burning fossil fuels, and natural gas is a fossil fuel. A lot of people, you buy into this propaganda that it's the bridge fuel, that it's the good fossil fuel. That's bullshit. I mean, there's more, the leakage of gas, the methane is actually worse, than burning carbons. And it produces more greenhouse gases. It's horrible. And plus it's very dangerous. I had a house that just blew up right near me from natural gas. And you hear about natural gas leaks and explosions all over the country all the time. So anyway, my goal was to get rid of my natural gas. So I put solar on the roof, and I got a heat pump, which is a very efficient way to heat your house with electricity. I converted my stove from a gas stove to a induction stovetop. It's electric, but it's not like the old-fashioned electric burners. It's highly manageable. I mean, like you have a large degree of control as you do when you're cooking on gas. All these little dots here are different degrees of heat. So it works very quickly. It works by magnets. So the electricity makes the magnets spin around under the glass, which makes the molecules in the iron spin around. So you have to use either cast iron pans or stainless steel that has a high iron content. So you can't use copper, for instance. So that's one thing, a trade-off. But anyway, so that was my main fear was having to cook on an electric stove. But when I found induction, it's great. So then I got an electric car, which is how I drove up here to the Poconos, and I plug it in. So that's my house there, where you can see the cord going from the tree. So I go out my door on my balcony, across the sidewalk, into the tree, down the tree, and into my car. So that's how I charge my car. So I'm using 100% natural electricity. So the other important thing is to have a third party supplier, through Pico or whoever, that produces solar or wind energy. So I buy my through Pico, through my regular electric bill. I buy a solar energy. So all of of course, all the molecules are mixed together when they come through the wires, whether it's nuclear or natural gas or whatever, how the electricity is made. My dollars only go to pay for solar or wind. So that's something that everybody should do if you haven't already. Call your utility company, whether it's Pico or PPL or whatever, and say you want to switch to a third-party renewable energy supplier. So in that way, I'm a 100% electric house. And so I no longer use any natural gas whatsoever. So I also became a nonviolent protester. We went to the site where they were drilling to put a gas pipe, through a community, and we shut it down. We chained ourselves to the extraction site, and I was arrested and hauled off. And but that kind of taught me, I saw firsthand how the communities along the pipelines were spending so much time and effort protecting their land, from having these pipelines come through the beautiful farms in Lancaster County, and through the homes in Chester County and so on. And that you know, when they appealed to the state government to help them, that our representatives were all helping the fossil fuel companies. You know, that Pennsylvania has been controlled by fossil fuels for hundreds of years. You know, whether it was coal in the beginning, and then oil, of course, was discovered in Pennsylvania. The first oil well in the world was in Pennsylvania, in Titusville. And for 50 years, Pennsylvania was the oil capital of the entire world until oil was discovered in Texas. So we have a legacy of this. And now, of course, it's fracking. That's on the right there. That's a fracking site, extraction site. So politically, we as the people of Pennsylvania have to combat this, because our legislators in Harrisburg are so influenced by fossil fuel industry. I have a friend that told me that when she became a state representative, that the very first day that she was in office, the fossil fuel lobbyists showed up in her office and offered her money. She's a Democrat, and so this doesn't matter what party you're in, that everybody is offered money by the fossil fuel industry, and they control a large part of our state government. And that's why they've been able to get away with fracking, which is destroying our water and destroying communities and endangering us. I mean, who would put up with this? And we're not making money from this. All the money is going out of state to these corporations in Texas and other places. So it's just a horrible situation. So that got me involved. I started something called Proud Pennsylvania. I have a website, proudpennsylvania.org. So what we do is work to elect state representatives and senators who are opposed to fracking and who are supportive of small businesses and locally owned businesses. They're supportive of regional economies, and they're supportive of fighting corporate power and protecting community power. So we were able to elect a number of people. And we now have a Proud Pennsylvania Legislative Working Group that's headed by Leanne Kruger, a state rep from the Swarthmore area. And so I started all together now because I realized I couldn't combine my political work with my 501c3 charitable work. So they're two separate organizations. So I started all together now to build our regional economy. So we work to unite urban and rural communities to build regional economies that work for everyone, including our natural environment. So, and that was in 2019. And when we produce our basic needs locally, we move power, wealth, and opportunity from outside corporations to our own communities, because we're producing our own food, our own renewable energy, our own clothing, our own building materials, our own medicine locally. Instead of having that money go out when we buy from corporations, that money is staying in our own community. So, and there's urgency with climate change that, as I mentioned earlier, these long distance supply chains are going to be more and more disrupted by weather and pandemics and social unrest. And so what we do today to build resilient local economies will mean the survival or not, you know, of future generations when the effects of climate change, you know, really become severe. So, and I also believe that local self-reliance is the common ground between the political left and the political right. The political left tends to focus on community and cooperative efforts, the political right on self-reliance. If you put the two together, it's a community self-reliance. It's not far for either to go. And I think that this is a way to heal our nation's divide, which is largely a rural and urban divide. And when you think about it, the rural-urban divide really became severe with globalization, because in the old days, urban and rural communities did co-create local supply chains. That's what it was all about. And they trusted each other. They depended on each other. There was an interdependent relationship, you know, between urban and rural communities to build the local needs for both communities. And that was disrupted with globalization. It was globalization that destroyed manufacturing and put a lot of people, urban people, out of business, and it also destroyed local farming, local food systems, and so on, because everything became consolidated under corporations. So the basic needs that we're talking about here are food, medicine, clothing, building materials, and renewable energy. And so all together now, we've started these coalitions of farmers and entrepreneurs. And the coalitions we have so far are industrial hemp, plant medicine, clothing and textiles, and the grain coalition. And then we also have community advisory groups in renewable energy and zero waste. And I know one of your other speakers earlier was Brent Gross, and he's the leader of our renewable energy advisory group. And another one of your speakers, I think, was Drew Oberholzer, and
Yep.
he's in our industrial hemp coalition. Anyway, let me just explain a little bit more about these. So the mission of the coalitions is to build regenerative local supply chains to increase the supply. And by regenerative, I mean that, when we're talking about farming, that we use regenerative organic farming practices that restore the health to our soil. So that's how we focus on increasing the supply of our basic needs. And then we educate to increase the demand. So we educate people about the importance of local economies and the importance of buying local. And then at the same time that we're building these local supply chains, we want to increase diversity and inclusion to make this a more just economy. And so we're building a community of shared values. That's one of the things that has been a problem in our society, as I mentioned earlier, that we're so individualistic and we're so oriented towards money and material gain rather than doing things for the good of all. So we really need to develop a community of shared values. So our Industrial Hemp Coalition, this is a gathering at Pocono Organics the summer of 2019, made up of farmers and entrepreneurs that are interested in using hemp in their products. So one of the products is Hemp Crete, which is mixes hemp, the woody herd. It's the center of the woody center of the hemp plant is chopped up and mixed with lime and water, and it's used as a insulation and wall material in homes. This is a picture of Hemp Crete walls, and so it's a great insulator. It lowers the cost of heating and cooling as much as from 30 to 60% above traditional fiberglass. That replaces fiberglass and styrofoam insulation, which are toxic substances, with a healthy substance. It's pest resilient, mildew resilient, mold, it's fire retardant, and so on. And it continually absorbs carbons indefinitely. It's continually pulling carbons from the air. And when you plant hemp, the plant itself absorbs more carbons than trees. Yeah. So it also restores the soil. That they use hemp plants to restore the soil in brownfields. They use it in Chernobyl, in Russia after the nuclear disaster there, and also as far as the growing of hemp, it uses a byproduct of hemp, because hemp is used for many things. With the seeds, you can turn that into hemp milk or flour. CBD, that's a different strand, but nevertheless, so it can be plant, it can be medicine. In this case, it's a building material. So you can actually have a dual or even a triple crop, from hemp for 2 or 3 different end uses. So this is Hemp Crete Week. We had one last year and we're planning one this year. That's me actually applying the Hemp Crete to a system that's actually blowing the Hemp Crete into a form. And we're also have started a sort of a workforce development project to teach inner city communities how to use Hemp Crete. These are Hemp Crete planters that we are teaching people to build, and also how to renovate houses using Hemp Crete for the walls. Our clothing and textile coalition is a coalition of local designers and manufacturers. This is an event we had for a local designer called Lobo Ma. So they design and make clothing in Philadelphia, and they are all set when the time comes to use hemp. Like what we're trying to do is to have a dirt to shirt supply chain.
I love it.
Now that is a complicated process because the part of the hemp plant that you use for fiber is called the bast, and it's the long pieces on the hemp stem, and that has to be processed into a form where you can turn it into textiles, and that process is very expensive. So because there was a ban on hemp for 80 years, we weren't growing hemp for 80 years because of the ban, and that just was lifted a few years ago. So the industry has not grown, and that's one of the reasons that Altogether now chose the hemp industry, because we could have an influence on this nascent industry from the beginning in terms of the values and building local supply chains. So like the Chinese, for instance, have been growing hemp this whole 80 years, and so they're the world leaders in hemp production. And a lot of people that use hemp for clothing in the United States now, I mean, you can buy hemp clothing in the United States, but that hemp for the most part comes from China. So they're way ahead of us. So our dream with the Clothing and Textile Coalition is the dirt to shirt supply chain. So we're finding the buyers. So we're trying to raise the demand and supply equally. So we're raising the demand among the designers, for the hemp and flax as well. One of our members of the Clothing and Textile Coalition is Heidi Barr. She has a textile kitchen textile company, Kitchen Garden Textiles, and so she buys her linen from Europe, and so now she's working with a farmer. That's a field of flax behind her. So this is Knee High Farm, and so she's working with that farmer to process the hemp so that she can make it into textiles. So she says that it won't be long before she'll have the first local hemp napkin, but it will cost $1,000, $1,000 napkin, because it's so expensive to make, to do this on a small scale.
Right.
But you got to start somewhere. So she's starting the process to learn, but that's where we're at right now. Another coalition is the Plant Medicine Coalition. And so with plant medicines, that includes CBD, THC, and all the traditional plant medicines, golden seal, lavender, and so on. So this is a meeting of the Plant Medicine Coalition at Barefoot Botanicals near Doylestown. They hosted this event, and Linda Shanahan is our plant medicine coordinator. And we just started a series of plant medicine podcast, basically. We just had one the other day, our first one. That's Linda in the middle. So we had Ben and Kara Davies reported on CBD. They're a family farm, and they raise hemp for CBD. They process it on the hemp. It's like a vertical business, and then you can retail it. So if you want to buy CBD for sleeping, for instance, you can buy it from them. It's called Wild Fox Provisions.
They're right here in Berks County. They're in Bartow, over by
there you go.
Yep.
They are. Yep. And that's where I get my CBD for sleeping. And then Linda Shanahan from Barefoot Botanicals, they produce a whole array of various plant medicines, and we're planning now a whole series of plant medicine educational programs coming up. So anybody who wants to attend can go to our website, altogetherNowPA.org, and sign up for our mailing list, and you'll get an announcement the next time we have a plant medicine a program. You'll be notified. And there again, we're trying to move our dollars from the pharmaceutical companies to our local plant medicine farms and healers. And then our third speaker is from Terabita, a medical marijuana dispensary, talking about the health benefits of THC. And there, I could go on forever about this subject, but right now, Terravita was just sold. It was one of the only And the reason that we featured them is because it was locally owned. Well, it just sold to an outfit in Chicago, and the other locally owned medical dispensary, Keystone Shops, was just sold to a multi-state corporation in Florida. So now we don't have any
local anymore. Oh
medical
no.
marijuana dispensaries. And so these medical marijuana dispensaries are all lined up to grab all the licenses once adult use is legalized, which is going to happen in the next year, most likely, because New York and New Jersey just legalized. They're in line to get those licenses. And so if they do, our small farmers and local entrepreneurs are going to lose out on this huge business. They're predicting that the sales of marijuana, once adult use is legalized, will be $2 billion a year in Pennsylvania. Wow. Last year, the sales for medical marijuana were 910 million last year. So you can imagine when it's fully legalized, it's going to go up to 2 billion. That's $2 billion a year coming out of our pockets, Pennsylvania's pockets, into the coffers of out-of-state corporations in Chicago and Florida and so on. What are we doing here? We're just total suckers. So we have to pressure our state legislature to disallow this. We can control this. Our state legislature can make the rules on this. They are making the rules on this. And they should say that no out-of-state corporations can own our adult licenses, and decentralize the system and make sure that it's our small farmers and our Black and brown entrepreneurs in particular that get these licenses, because the communities that were most hurt by the war on drugs are Black and brown communities in the urban areas. So Altogether Now has started, a campaign called Pot Profits for Pennsylvanians.
Nice.
So we're working with the Proud Pennsylvania legislative group to begin this campaign to inform Pennsylvanians. I think if Pennsylvanians knew about this, they would be outraged. Why should we give this golden opportunity that comes around once? It's like when oil was discovered or when gold was discovered. This is such a huge industry. If it weren't so big, who would really care? But this is huge. We could rebuild our inner cities with this. We could help our rural communities, rebuild our rural communities and our small farmers and so on. So we need to have these $2 billion go into our companies. So you'll be hearing more about this.
Yes.
Of what's coming. Okay, so the Grain Coalition, made up of grain farmers, millers, and the end businesses that buy local grain, the brewers, the bread bakers, the pasta makers, the noodle makers, the empanada makers, the distilleries, and I mentioned breweries. So that's what the Grain Coalition does. And so here we trace the supply chain from the farmer to the miller to the bread baker. And here's an example. During the pandemic, the store River Ward's Produce ran out of flour. There was a run on flour because everybody all of a sudden started making
bread at home. Yeah.
Making bread at home. And he couldn't find flour. And so through the Grain Coalition, he was connected to Small Valley Mill. And he drove 45 minutes from Philadelphia and picked up a station wagon full of these bags of flour here. And he continues, to buy. So that's what we're trying to do, is connect these local supply chains to build resiliency. So we have a renewable energy advisory group, and we don't have a project there yet, but we're looking at getting involved with the legalization of community energy, where farm communities or urban communities can generate their own electricity through a shared system.
Brent touched on that in our solar discussion, so you guys should go back and look at that.
Yeah. It's a really, like, most states allow community solar, and in Pennsylvania it's illegal.
Right.
But community solar, the array is paid for by a community of people. Like, you put it in a vacant lot in the city, and 10 houses that are around own the array, and they generate their own electricity.
Kind of like a solar community garden.
yeah, like a CSA or something.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the other advisory group is on zero waste. And so renewable energy and zero waste are a factor in all the coalitions. And so they advise the other coalitions, like, how can we have a zero waste? Like with hemp, for instance, how can you use the whole plant and not have waste? You can use some of it for animal bedding, for instance. And so in all that we do, we try to have zero waste, and we try to run on renewable energy. So we want to build an inclusive economy with prosperity for all. So as I mentioned, we're doing for instance, a workforce development project to teach inner city communities how to use Hemp Crete. So we want that to be a factor in all we do to build inclusion. And as I mentioned earlier, this is really about changing our values. And Martin Luther King called for a revolution of values back in the 60s to move us from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. And so we're picking up that banner that King started to really, change our society from one that values money to one that values life. That life is more important than money. And we forget that. How many times do we forget that? So because we're conditioned that we're full if we don't get the lowest price when we shop and the highest return when we invest, without any regard to the consequences, to workers and animals, communities, and the natural environment. So we want to build a caring economy and make economic decisions not to maximize profits, but to maximize the health and well-being of our communities and ecosystems while receiving a fair return. So this is what we all need to think about, whether we're a consumer, just a consumer as we all are, or whether we're a business owner or we're an investor, that we need to change. Every time we buy something, we need to think, how is this transaction going to affect nature? How is it going to affect the workers? And it's not about getting the cheapest price. Usually when you get the cheap price, somebody's suffering for it. The animals are suffering in a factory farm. The workers are suffering, in a sweatshop. So it's not about getting the lowest price. I know a lot of well-to-do people that insist on getting the lowest price possible. It's ridiculous. I mean, we should be thinking, like, how does this economic decision do the most good, for communities and for nature, have it be organic and fair trade and so on. And so we really need to change the way we think to have this revolution of values and build a caring economy where we care for each other, we care for the animals, we care for our planet. And nothing is more important in this than changing our economy and changing the values with which we make economic transactions. So in the end, we all belong to the vibrant community of life on Earth. And it's knowing our interdependence, it's feeling our interdependency, where we can feel the suffering of the pigs, we can feel the suffering of the workers in these horrible plantations or extraction mines or whatever, that we have compassion because we know that what affects others affects us. We're all part of the same community of life on Earth. And we need to lead with love. When I made that decision to share with my competitors, I was afraid. I was afraid that my profits would go down, that I might go out of business if I shared my secrets. But it was my love for the pigs and my love for the small farmers that gave me the courage to overcome my fear. So that's what we need to think about. What do we really love and care about? And I think one of the things that I just can't fathom is how people don't really care about their grandchildren. They're not connecting. What we do today will affect the life and death opportunities for their grandchildren. And that's one of the things that I learned from Indigenous people, that they say over and over again. There's really two things you hear most from Indigenous people: honor your mother and protect your children. Those are the two things. And yet white people, we disregard both of those things. We desecrate our Mother Earth every day in different ways. And we don't protect our children because we're not thinking about the seventh generation. What are we doing today? All of nature, you ever see the movie, The March of the Penguins, how the mother and father penguin, what they go through to protect that egg and those baby penguins, you know, that's how evolution happens. We create the conditions for new life, you know, and humans have stopped doing that. We are not creating the conditions for new life. And we're doing the opposite. We're destroying the conditions for new life. We're destroying the opportunities for our grandchildren to even live, you know, much less live the wonderful, delightful life we have enjoyed on this beautiful planet. So we really need to recognize what we love, and work to protect that. So, you know, if we're going to succeed, in leaving a viable planet, you know, for future generations of all species, we as humans need to find our rightful place in the web of life, you know, no longer as exploiters, but as lovers of life. And, you know, that's the whole thing here. We humans, you know, think we are above nature or outside of it or whatever. We have to find our place in this web of life, and have our role be one of love.
Beautiful.
So,
Wow.
I hope you'll think about joining our community all together now. That's our website, altogetherNowPA.org. So go online and sign up to be on our mailing list, and you'll hear about educational programs. Once it's safe, we'll be having in-person gatherings, because happiness and joy are a big part of what we do. So come have fun with us.
Oh, amazing. Judy, thank you so much. That's
Wow.
so inspiring and awe-invoking. And thank you so much for sharing your personal, you know, lesson and journey with us. You know, you are doing so much. I love that through all the organizations and all the work you've done, there's really this holistic view, this integrative view of how all these pieces fit together. I think that's part of the problem too, is that just as individuals or even as businesses or organizations, we get stuck in these, you know, ruts where we only see our piece of the pie and aren't looking at it as a whole picture. So that's
Exactly.
fantastic. And I think it's really, you know, building the awareness is such a big piece of it. Having people, you know, taking action, having people pay attention to get them to stand up and do something about all of these issues, because they all do, you know, have a huge part of everyone's well-being. So just to have us become more mindful and intentional as consumers, as community members, as family members. It's great. I love the message. We are really excited. We're so happy to have you here to share this message. And we really hope we can, you know, here in Berks County in the Greater Reading area, be one of those partners for you guys and keep the conversation going.
That'd be great. I'd love that.
Risa, is there anyone that, I know it's been quiet on the Facebook side.
It has been quiet, but I've been so engrossed in this whole presentation, and I love the way she wove her life experiences and the lessons she's learned into what she's doing, and it's incredible. And you've done so much. I always love when people from the 60s come, you know, do all kinds of great things with their lives. You have an incredible life story. You really do.
Thank you.
Was there any comments or questions on Facebook at all, Risa?
No, there wasn't. No.
We'll go over a couple minutes, but
watching, but nobody.
That's good. Like I said, we'll have
maybe
this.
They were maybe they were engrossed as well and just trying to, you know, absorb it all. I love the way this program sort of wrapped up so many other conversations we've had earlier in the week.
I thought the same
solar
thing.
And hemp and food, and it just kind of included everything, which was a great way to wind up. Yeah.
Definitely. It was a great way. Yes, thank you, Judy. I'm glad we saved you for Sunday because you're right, Risa. I thought the same thing as Judy was talking and going through her wonderful stories. Like, we touched on a lot of these things over the course of these last 4 days with our other programming. And so it was really a nice way to tie it up in a nice, beautiful, intentional bow. So thank you.
That's right.
We need to get her.
Inviting me.
Yeah, we need to get her here in Reading.
Yes, we will. I will be in touch for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Risa.
That was great.
I'll talk to you soon, okay?
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, bye.